This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to the link in the description below so they know that I sent you. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and my full set limited review for War of the Spark will start pretty soon. The full set will be fully spoiled on either Thursday or Friday, not 100% sure because the spoiler season is different from they usually are, but either way, that means once it is spoiled, I'll be spending the next week and then some looking at every card in the set and giving my initial impressions of them for draft and sealed. I use letter grades to talk about how good I think these cards are, and in this video I explain what each of those letter grades means. If you are already familiar with my grading system, you probably don't need to watch this again, but if you're new to the channel since the last set review, this is the video for you. Now let's get started. So I think the best way of explaining my grades is by using cards from the most recent set, which is Ravnica Allegiance. So for each of these letters, that's what we'll do. My letter grades in large part are based on how seeing a specific card in a pack or playing it in your deck makes you feel. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Let's start out at A. An A is a card that is so powerful it has the ability to completely shift a game in your favor, even if you're behind. In other words, it's a bomb. They can also warp your draft, as if you see one, there's a very good chance that you should try and take it and put it into your deck, even if it's not in the right colors. You're ecstatic to have these in pack one, pick one situations, as there isn't anything better. I'm pretty stingy with A's, and the vast majority of them are either rare or mythic rare, though most sets have one or two uncommons that fit into the lower range of A. It is worth noting that this set seems unusually powerful, so we may be seeing more of them than usual. So an example of an A in Return to Ravnica would be Biogenic Ooze, who comes into play with a friend, progressively makes itself and that friend larger, and can even make more friends. If left unchecked, it will end the game. Another A is Ethereal Absolution, which most considered the best card in Ravnica Allegiance. It immediately impacts the board by making your creatures bigger and your opponent's smaller, and then can churn out spirit tokens until your opponent is dead. Both of these cards were cards you were ecstatic to open, and cards you would take and try to warp your draft around if you saw them. Next up is B. These are cards that actively make you feel good about having them in your deck. They're very powerful, but don't reach the A level of warping a game completely in your favor. These are cards that are often going to be first pickable, provided that the pack doesn't have an A in it. These are your highly efficient creatures and removal spells that can greatly shift the game in your favor. In most sets, the majority of Bs are uncommon or rare, though around one common in each color usually gets into the B range. Again, we may be seeing more than that in War of the Spark because this set looks super strong. In Ravnica Allegiance, examples of Bs are Ministrant of Obligation and Skewer the Critics. The Ministrant gives you some very efficient stats for the investment, a total of 4/3 worth of stats for 3 mana. Trading your Ministrant for your opponent's X2 and then getting 2/1/1 flyers was a powerful early play. Skewer the Critics was an excellent and efficient removal spell, especially if you got Spectacle going, and could even do the last few damage to your opponent. These are both cards that you would take as many copies of as a draft gives you, and that's true of most Bs. Next is C. My grades usually come out in a bell curve, with C being the most common grade of all. These are cards that you are neither happy nor sad to have in your deck, and the vast majority of the cards in a set fit at this level. They're filler. There is almost never a pack weak enough, pack one, pick one, where it is right to take one of these, but picking these up mid to late pack and playing them in your deck is fine. They occur at all rarities, but commons most frequently end up here. Two examples from Ravnica Allegiance are Carrion Imp, a 4-mana 2/3 with flying that can gain you a couple of life, and Impassioned Orator, a 2-mana 2/2 that can gain you some life. Both have some relevance at all stages of the game and are reasonably efficient, but you playing one of these is never going to scare your opponent either, or make you feel like you're just going to win the game. Next is D. These are cards that you don't feel so good about having in your deck. They usually only end up in it if you are short on playables because something went wrong in the draft, but they are passable if you're desperate or if you really need to fill in a specific part of your curve. In other words, they are bad, but not quite unplayable. These occur at all rarities, but once again, commons end up here the most. Ds from Ravnica Allegiance include Coral Commando, a vanilla 3-mana 3/2, and Knight of Sorrows, a 5-mana 3/3 with Afterlife 1. The Commando just has mediocre stats, but you'll play it if you need a 3-drop. Knight of Sorrows also has bad stats, and even though it has a bunch of other text, it doesn't do enough to redeem the bad stats it gives you in the first place. Next, we have Fs. I don't give them very often, but the cards that do receive them are the kind that you should absolutely never play. They are cards who essentially do nothing or do more harm than good for you. There are actually always a good number of rare Fs and mythic Fs because cards of higher complexity who do some really cool stuff often aren't actually that good and limited. Basically, there are usually a few cards from all rarities that end up in F. Fs from Guilds of Ravnica were Root Snare and Smothering Tithe. Root Snare and other fog effects are just bad. because they do nothing to impact the board, and in many cases basically just say, let me not die for one more turn, and if you're resorting to playing a do-nothing card to get you there, well, you're just going to die on your next turn. Don't play Fogs. Smothering Tithe is bad because it costs 4 mana and has very little impact on the game or board. Giving you treasure tokens if your opponent decides not to pay the mana just isn't going to be worth it ever. How many treasures do you have to get for this to pay you back? Something like 4. Chances are good you won't get there, since you'll probably die against an opponent who is actually affecting the board. In addition to these more clear-cut grades, there are also 2 special grade categories where I provide more than 1 grade. The first of these categories are build-arounds. These are cards that have some particular type of synergy that can make it so that they have a particularly high ceiling, but if you aren't able to get the right kind of cards to complement it, it is significantly worse, and in some cases not worth playing at all. Examples of that in Guilds of Ravnica are Hero of Precinct 1, who if you didn't have a bunch of multicolored cards to help make tokens was like a C, but probably around a B+ if you could really take advantage. Same thing with Teysa Karlov. She was probably a C in your typical black-white deck, but if you had enough Afterlife and other death triggers, she could move into the B range. The other category is sideboard cards. These are cards that are usually a D or F in your main 40 cards, but can provide some help out of the sideboard, and for that reason, they shouldn't be treated like most Ds and Fs. Examples of this from Ravnica Allegiance are Exposed to Daylight and Sagittar's Volley. Expose was probably a D+ or C- in your main board, but was the exact kind of card you wanted to have against opponents with several applicable targets, where it rose up to a B- or so. Sagittar's Volley was like a D in your main board, but was great to bring in against people with flyers, so it was a C out of your sideboard. Well, that does it for this video. I'm really excited to start the War of the Spark set review. This set looks unlike any we've really ever seen before, and it's going to be a lot of fun to start digging into the cards, and to play the format as well in the near future. Thanks for watching.